Allow me take you through one of the most unbelievable stories ever recorded. A story that proves that you can lose everything and still survive if you hold on to the one thing that matters the most. His name was Louis Zamperini, an Olympic runner turned World War II airman.
In 1943, during what should have been a routine rescue mission, his plane malfunctioned and plunged into the Pacific Ocean, killing 8 crew members instantly.
Any survivors?
Only three men stranded on a tiny life raft. No food, no fresh water, just the open sea and sharks circling relentlessly. Day after day, they drifted 47 days under blistering sun, starving, dehydrated, shot at by enemy planes, storms tossing them like leaves in the wind. Death was not just possible, it was certain. But Louis clung to one thing he knew: God.
And when the sea finally spat him onto shore, it wasn't rescue, it was capture. He was thrown into a brutal Japanese prison camp, beaten, starved, humiliated, forgotten.
Yet, even there, he prayed, and God stayed. Years later, when Louis was rescued and reporters asked him how he survived, his answer stunned the world. I lost everything, but I did not lose God. And because I held on to Him, I found hope in every place I never wanted to be. And that right there is the story of God's people throughout Scripture. Adam and Eve lost Eden, but not God. Israel lost Canaan, but not God. Even in Babylon, land gone, temple burnt, God still whispered, I will restore you. I will bring you back. Jeremiah 24, verse 6.
The land was only the sign of the relationship, never the limit of it.
So even when we lose our land, God never loses us.
Exactly. And that takes us straight to where the story truly begins. Hi there. This is Q4E9, and today we are exploring the topic: heirs of promises, prisoners of hope. You ready? Let's get into it.
But first, the key highlights. 1. Losing the land is not losing God. Whether Eden was lost or Canaan was forfeited, God's presence never left his people, even in exile. 2. God's promises require human participation. Just like Israel, God's gifts come by grace, but stepping into them requires obedience and faith. 3. God builds reset buttons into his kingdom. The Sabbath, sabbatical year, and Jubilee reveal a God who restores the broken and lifts those who fall. 4. Jesus is the fulfillment of every land promise. Where Joshua led into physical rest, Jesus leads into spiritual and eternal rest, the better Canaan.
In the beginning, before time began, before sound existed, before even light ever pierced through darkness, God spoke, and out of nothing, everything appeared. Galaxies spun, oceans roared, mountains rose. Life blossomed at his command. And that single act of creation crowned him as the rightful owner of all things, all lands, all nations, all territories that ever were or ever will be.
And yet, the remarkable thing is, this owner isn't stingy. He's generous, lavishly generous. He gives not because we deserve, but because giving is who He is.
You mean like Eden?
That is correct. Eden was not just a garden, it was God's masterpiece, crafted by His own hands, a sanctuary overflowing with beauty, harmony, and abundance, a divine classroom where every leaf, every river, every sunrise taught Adam and Eve something about who God is. Now, inside this God designed space, the couple enjoyed privileges reserved only for those in an unbroken relationship with God. Total provision, physically, spiritually, emotionally, everything they needed flowed effortlessly from a generous God. Total revelation, Eden was not merely a home, it was a learning center, a living lesson book where creation preached the character of God.
But then something happened, not to Eden, to the relationship. When trust broke at the entrance of sin, the connection with God shattered. Their location had to change. And Eden? Eden didn't fall apart. They did. And that perfect home, it became a memory.
So they didn't lose Eden because God changed. They did because their hearts changed.
Again, that is correct. Sin always creates a disconnection, and wherever sin disconnects, it eventually relocates you physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
And we see the same pattern with Abraham's descendants, Israel. Just as Adam and Eve didn't earn Eden, Israel didn't contribute anything to deserve Canaan. Neither are we deserving of the heavenly Canaan. Deuteronomy 9 makes it very clear. They didn't receive the land because of their righteousness, but because of God's grace and His promise. The land, like Eden, was God's initiative, not their merit. They were tenants. God remained the landlord. And that includes us today. We are heirs of the heavenly Canaan, not because we're flawless, but because God is faithful. So they didn't lose Eden because God changed. They did because their hearts changed.
God's promises are gifts, but you still need faith to step into them.
So Eden was a gift. Canaan was a gift. And salvation today is also a gift.
You are on a roll, Casey. That is correct too. Everything good that we've ever received from God was never earned. It was always given by grace and accessed by faith. Now, back to the Exodus. Imagine an entire nation with no address, no land, no home, no place to anchor their identity. That was Israel for over 440 years. Squatters in Egypt, roamers in the wilderness, a people without roots or a place to call home, a nation floating through history.
Almost like a people floating, existing, but not rooted.
Exactly. At a very basic level, land anchors identity. It tells the world who you are and where you belong. And now, after centuries, God was about to give Israel a home of their own.
But this gift came with a caveat. In fact, a two-part process requiring a divine human partnership that every believer today must learn. We'll take turns. I'll start. Part 1, activation of the promise. Even though God had promised them the land, they needed to act on the promise by faith through tangible actions for a manifestation of the promise.
So a promise isn't always automatic.
Now, Casey, some are conditional and only manifest when faith produces obedience.
Part 2. Keeping the Promise. Securing the land was one thing, but keeping it required staying in covenant with God. In other words, they could not have the land and its blessings without the blessing of the God who owns the land. These principles are as valid today as they were then.
Now, even after Israel settled in Canaan, the title deed never truly transferred. God remained the owner. And as the true owner of the whole earth, Psalms 24, verse 1, the Lord has the right to assign the land to Israel or to take it away.
So the Israelites were tenants. God was the landlord.
That is correct. Tenants, or better still, stewards of God's property. Psalm 24, verse 1 says the earth belongs to the Lord, meaning Israel, and in extension all of us, are simply God's long-term guests on His land. We own nothing. We steward everything.
When you get to Joshua chapters 13 through 21, something fascinating happens. The story slows down, and God starts dividing the land tribe by tribe. But look closely. There is a divine pattern hidden in plain sight. The first half of Joshua shows how God gave the land. The second half shows how Israel took the land. Grace and obedience, grace and responsibility standing side by side, never one without the other. This allocation reveals two things simultaneously. One, what God had already given them. And number two, what they still needed to step into by faith.
Israel could live securely in the inheritance God gave, not because they conquered it by their strength, but because they were legitimate tenants under God's ownership. Yet for this to be fully manifested, God's initiative must be matched by human response.
So God dispossesses the enemy. But we must take a step of faith to possess the promise?
That is correct. This is one of those promises that do not fulfill themselves. You must step into what God has already provided. Grace does not replace obedience here. The land was a gift, not earned, not merited, just like our salvation. But even a gift must be opened, even a door must be walked through. And this is where the story becomes a mirror for us. The dynamics of Israel's inheritance perfectly illustrates the dynamics of our salvation. Like Israel, we cannot earn salvation. It is entirely a gift, as we find in Ephesians 2, verse 8 to 9. But to enjoy the fullness of that salvation, we must step into the responsibilities of discipleship or risk losing what God intended for us, just like the former tenants lost Canaan, as we find in Deuteronomy 9, verse 5. In other words, God gives the promise, but only faith filled obedience helps us live inside that promise, if that makes sense.
The spirit of prophecy captures this with almost surgical precision. It says, each one must today, daily, strive to conquer self with the help of Jesus. Each one has a personal battle to fight. Not even God can make our characters noble or our lives useful unless we become co-workers with Him. Those who decline the struggle lose the strength and joy of victory. Ministry of Healing, page 487.2.
Did you catch that? Every person, you, me, Israel, has a personal battle to fight. Not Canaanites this time, not giants, not even the walled cities of Jericho, but self. the thoughts that we entertain secretly, the habits that we excuse, the attitudes that we refuse to surrender. Just as Israel had to conquer a literal territory, we too must conquer internal territories, the space in our hearts where sin tries to build strongholds.
And here's the sobering truth. God can give the promise. God can open the door. God can clear the path. But God will not force you to walk into victory. He invites you to fight with Him, not instead of Him.
Like Israel, we have been given a wonderful gift, salvation. A gift so priceless it cost heaven everything. But scripture is clear. Just like Israel could forfeit their land by carelessness, we too can forfeit these blessings of salvation if we drift, neglect, or refuse to cooperate with grace. Grace saves us, obedience keeps us walking in what grace has provided.
It is often said that you can tell the mindset of a king by the kind of the laws he legislates. And when you look at God's laws about land, the sabbatical year and the Jubilee, you catch a breathtaking glimpse into the heart of the King of the universe.
What kind of glimpse?
A glimpse of a God who refuses to allow the wealthy to swallow the poor, who never wanted anyone trapped forever by bad decisions, crushing debts, generational cycles, or the failures of their parents. So God did something no other nation in the world dared to do. He built reset buttons into Israel's calendar. Every seventh year, for instance, the sabbatical year, the land rested, farmers rested, servants rested, even the animals also rested.
Every 50th year, the Jubilee, debts erased, slaves freed, land returned, families restored. Imagine that. A society where no one stays down forever. A system where mercy resets what life has broken.
So, nobody could be trapped in poverty permanently?
Correct. In Egypt, people lost their land and became Pharaoh's slaves for life. There was no way back, but in God's system, freedom was never meant to expire. Redemption was always built into the economy. Restoration was always one jubilee away. This this is what the heart of the king looks like in this case. Now here is another shocker. According to God's law, the land could never be permanently sold. Only leased, never lasts.
But why?
Because both the land and the people belonged to God. And God refuses to create a world where the powerful hoard everything and the poor disappear without a trace. This legislation protected every family and kept everyone connected to hope.
And God added one more layer, a layer of redemption. Now, if someone lost their land due to hardship, their nearest relative, their kinsman redeemer, had a duty to redeem it, to buy it back, restore it, and protect the family legacy. This was not charity, it was covenant responsibility. I guess the story of Ruth will begin to make sense now.
So, this was God's way of saying, no one falls alone.
Exactly. In God's kingdom, rescue is a family assignment. And all of this, the resets, the mercy, the redemption, the equality, all of it pointed to the gospel. Because the gospel does the same thing. It erases distinctions. Rich and poor, masters and servants, privileged and underprivileged. all stand equal at the foot of the cross.
At the cross, we all stand on level ground.
Right on point. That was the entire heartbeat of the Jubilee, to remind Israel that every blessing they had came from God's grace, not their goodness. Sadly, Israel ignored the Jubilee. For centuries, they refused to practice it, and eventually the warnings came true. They dispossessed the poor, so God dispossessed them, and they were removed from the land, just as Second Chronicles 36, 20 to 21 records. A sobering reminder that grace rejected becomes blessings forfeited. Remember that.
Moving on, imagine this. You're standing on foreign soil, your temple burned to ashes, your land occupied, your identity shattered, your people scattered like dust in the wind. That was Israel in Babylon, rootless, homeless, broken.
Auch. So the promise failed?
Now, not really. The people failed, but the promise did not. Even in exile, God still whispered through Jeremiah, I will set my eyes on them for good. I will bring them back. Exile did not mean abandonment. Distance did not mean disownment. He was still their God even while they were not in the land. Israel may have lost the land, but they did not lose their God.
Because the promise that Israel would possess the land forever was always conditional. Obedience brought prosperity, rebellion brought exile.
So they actually broke the covenant?
Yes, they did, and repeatedly. From Deuteronomy to Kings to Jeremiah, warning after warning, yet they kept drifting until finally the land vomited them out. But here is a twist: when they repented with all their hearts, God restored them back.
Restoration was possible because the mercy of God outruns judgment.
But the prophets saw something even bigger, a restoration that no exile could stop. For instance, Isaiah spoke of a child, Isaiah 9:67. Zechariah spoke of a king riding a donkey, Zechariah 9, verse 9 and 16. Jeremiah spoke of a righteous branch. Ezekiel saw graves opening and hearts reviving. These promises were fulfilled in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, in whom all the promises to ancient Israel will have their fulfillment. As we find in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 20, and Romans 15, verse 8.
And here's what it means for us today. We no longer look forward to the earthly Canaan Caleb fought for. Through Jesus, our eyes are fixed on a better Canaan, the heavenly one, where God's promise of rest, abundance, and complete well-being will finally be fulfilled. In that sense, as Christians, our hope is based on Christ's promise that He will return and, after a 1,000-year period in heaven, establish His eternal kingdom on the earth made new. This will be the ultimate fulfillment of all the promises about the land. You don't want to miss that.
And that's a wrap for this week. Next week, we will be exploring the topic, the true Joshua. Till then, I remain your Sabbath school doodling out. Let's keep making it make sense, one study at a time.
If this message stirred even a whisper in your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Smash that like, drop a comment. Share this with someone who needs a faith boost. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified when we publish the next episode. But before you go, if you haven't yet made that life-changing decision to follow Christ, the invitation is still open. Don't wait. The clock is ticking and grace is calling. Remember, we weren't born just to survive and pay bills. You were created to reign with Him. So, keep the faith. Stay the course. No retreat, no surrender.